Today's note sheet will cover solving two-step inequalities. And the key concept here is using the same skills as solving two-step equations. So we've already learned the process for two-step equations. We're going to apply the same process to two-step inequalities. One of the major differences is remembering to flip your symbol when multiplying or dividing by a negative number. And also, instead of using an equal sign, we are using an inequality symbol, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. So let's take a look at number 1. And we see negative 7b plus 19 is less than negative 16. So the first step is we're going to circle the variable, and we're going to draw our t. The inverse of adding 19 would be subtracting 19. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. 19 minus 19 is 0. Bring down your variable, which is negative 7b. Bring down your symbol, and negative 16 minus 19 is negative 35. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide both sides by negative 7. Don't forget about the negative. Negative 7 divided by negative 7 is a 1 in disguise. So bring down your b. And because we divided both sides by a negative, we have to flip the symbol. Negative 35 divided by negative 7 is positive 5. Now, when we're solving inequalities, I don't require you to show the check, but I do expect that you're checking it. And when we solve inequalities, there are two checks. The first check is to check to make sure the 5 is actually correct. So we take it and plug it back into the original. I see the right side equals negative 16, so the left side must be that same number. So negative 7 times 5 is negative 35. And negative 35 plus 19 is in fact negative 16. So I know the 5 is correct. Now, to make sure the symbol is going the correct way, I see that this says b is greater than 5. So I pick a number greater than 5. So I'm going to choose 6. So negative 7 times 6 is negative 42. Negative 42 plus 19 is negative 23. And is negative 23 less than negative 16? It is, and that means my symbol is going the correct way. So when you solve these on your own, be sure you are doing both checks to assure that you get the correct answer. Okay, number 2, we're going to circle the variable, and this time I'm going to circle the minus sign because it's directly in front of the variable. And we're going to draw our t. So now we want to get the variable by itself, so we're going to get rid of 13 by subtracting 13, because 13 minus 13 is 0. When I bring down the minus 11d, I have to look at this minus as a negative. So I'm going to bring down negative 11d. Bring down the symbol, and 79 minus 13 is 66. The opposite of multiplication is division, and once again I'm dividing both sides by a negative because there's a negative in front of the variable. Negative 11 divided by negative 11 is a 1 in disguise. And don't forget to flip the symbol because I divided both sides by a negative. 66 divided by negative 11 is negative 6. So the answer is D is less than or equal to negative 6. Now, looking at number 3. Circle the variable and draw your t. The inverse of adding 1 is subtracting 1. 1 minus 1 is 0, so they cancel. Bring down q divided by 7 is greater than negative 6. Okay, the opposite of division is multiplication, so we're going to multiply both sides by we're going to multiply both sides by positive 7 because we are dividing by positive 7. So we're going to multiply both sides by positive 7. The 7's will cancel, 1 in disguise, and q is greater than negative 6 times 7 is negative 42. So circle your answer. Okay, now moving right along, now we're going to look at example number 4. Now we did these examples when we did two-step equations, and we called 4 and 5 a special case because you have to do something a little bit differently. Now, when it's a fraction like this, and there are two terms on top of the fraction, we have to get rid of the 2 first. So the opposite of division is multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we're going to bring down negative 3x plus 6 is less than or equal to 24. Okay, circle your variable and draw your t. The inverse of adding 6 is subtracting 6. 6 minus 6 is 0. Bring down your negative 3x. Bring down your symbol. And 24 minus 6 is 18. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide both sides by negative 3. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is a 1 in disguise. And I'm going to put my answer over here because I've run out of room. X is less than or equal to 18 divided by negative 3, negative 6. Now, you can see I made a mistake. So see if you can think about what mistake I made. That's correct. I forgot to flip the symbol. So make sure you always flip the symbol when you're dividing both sides by a negative, or multiplying both sides by a negative. Okay, moving on to number 5. Okay, this is another special case because there's 2 terms on top of the fraction, so we have to get rid of the 5 first. So we're going to multiply both sides by 5. Okay, 5 divided by 5 is 1, so we're going to bring down 4x minus 2 is greater than or equal to negative 20. Okay, circle your variable and draw your t. The inverse of subtracting 2, of course, is adding 2. Now, these cancel because we look at this minus 2 as negative 2. So negative 2 plus 2 is 0, so they cancel. Bring down your 4x, bring down your inequality symbol, and negative 20 plus 2 is, in fact, negative 18. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide both sides by 4. 4 divided by 4, so 1 in disguise. Bring down your variable, bring down your inequality symbol, and negative 18 divided by 4 is negative 4.5. Now, some of you assume that when you get a decimal or even a repeating decimal, that you did something wrong. But no, we didn't do anything wrong. Just be sure you always check your answer. If you check your answer and it checks, you know that you are correct. Okay, moving on to number 6. Okay, circle the variable and draw your t. The inverse of adding 13, of course, is subtracting 13. 13 minus 13 is 0. Bring down your variable and bring down your symbol. Negative 1 minus 13 is negative 14. Now, the opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide both sides by 11. 11 divided by 11 is a 1 in disguise, so y is greater than or equal to. And now, when we type this into our calculator, we notice that the decimal is really long. Okay, and what we don't want to do is we don't want to round. Now, this decimal in the previous problem was okay, it ended at 0.5. This one, when we type it in, does not end. Okay, it's going on and on after the decimal. So, what we do in that case is we look back at this and we're going to write our answer as a fraction. But before we write it as a fraction, we need to make sure it doesn't simplify. So is there a number that goes into 14 and 11 evenly? Okay. Yes, 1 goes in evenly, but 1 will not change it. So if 1 is the only one that can go into it evenly, then it's simplified. So we're going to write our answer as negative 14/11ths. And if we were to check that fraction into our original, it does in fact check. When we multiply by 11 and add 13, we will get -1. So let me go ahead and clear this out so we can work on the bottom. Okay, now we're going to do a different set of problems, and we're still doing 2 steps, but before we get to the 2-step, we actually have to distribute. So we're adding 1 extra step. So actually, this will in fact be a 3-step problem. So recall the distributive property. Distributive property means to multiply or distribute the outside number to everything inside the parentheses. Okay, so here's our example to review from when we did properties. So remember, we need to multiply the outside number to everything inside the parentheses. And remember, there's a minus sign in between the 2 parts that I'm distributing. So 3 times 6, and then remember there's a minus sign. And now we have to do 3 times 2. Okay, so we're going to apply that process down here, and then once we do the distributive property, we're left with a 2-step inequality. So we're going to distribute the -3 and to both parts inside the parentheses. So -3 times x is simply -3x. So whenever you're multiplying by a variable and there's no number in front, really essentially all you're doing is -3 times 1. And then putting the x and attaching it to the number. And -3 times 5 is -15. So we could write plus -15. But we learned when we did integers that adding a negative is the same as subtracting a positive. So I'm going to write it as -15 is less than or equal to 21. Now circle your variable and draw your t. The inverse of subtracting 15 is adding 15. So the 15s will equal 0. Bring down your variable. -3x is less than or equal to 21 plus 15 is 36. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide both sides by -3. -3 divided by -3 is a 1 in disguise. So x. Now I divided both sides by a negative, so I got to remember to flip the symbol. And 36 divided by -3 is -12. So x is greater than or equal to -12. Okay, moving right along. Now here, the problem is switched around a bit, so I'm just going to write down what I'm not going to distribute. So 72 is greater than. Now I'm ready for the distributive property. So -2 times -6 is +12. And -2 times 2x is -4x. Now remember there's a plus sign, so it's plus -4x, but remember that's the same as minus 4x. And now we're going to circle the variable and we're going to draw our t. And now we want to get the variable by itself, so let's get rid of the 12 by subtracting 12. And 12 minus 12 is 0. 72 minus 12 is 60. Bring down your symbol. And bring down your 4x is -4x, because remember there's a minus sign there. Okay, the opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide both sides by -4. Okay, 60 divided by -4 is -15. Remember, we're dividing both sides by a negative, so we're going to flip the symbol, and -4 divided by -4 is a 1 in disguise. Now, we learned back when we solved one-step problems that there are two ways to write an inequality. Okay, typically, when you see an inequality written, you will see the variable on the left side. Okay, now this one, the variable is on the right side. So we can always write inequalities two ways by reading it backwards. So if I read this backwards, I say that x is greater than -15. And those two inequalities mean exactly the same thing. Now, even if I go back to this problem, it's written the correct way, but I can also read it backwards and write it in another way. -12 is less than or equal to x. So it's important to know that there are two ways to write an inequality, and both answers are mathematically correct. Okay, number 9, last problem. So we're going to distribute. 4 times 6 is 24. There's a minus sign. 4 times 2x is 8x. So remember, I multiply the coefficients and then the letter goes after coefficient. Then we have greater than 56. So circle the variable, and I'm circling the minus sign that's in front of the variable, and I'm going to draw my t. Now I got to get the variable by itself, so I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. 24 minus 24 is 0. I'm going to bring down my minus 8x as negative 8x is greater than 56 minus 24 is 32. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide both sides by -8. -8 divided by -8 is a 1 in disguise. Remember to flip the symbol because we divided by a negative, and 32 divided by -8 is -4. Okay, that concludes our note sheet on solving two-step inequalities. I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a great day. Enjoy.